Hello from Giza! Today I want to show you one of the most beautiful and the best preserved pyramid-age tombs in Saqqara.
So we go to the largest Egyptian necropolis to explore the absolute gem, one of the most impressive and largest non-royal tombs of Saqqara. We'll see almost complete decorations of the tomb, including some of the best preserved reliefs of the Old Kingdom from almost 4,500 years ago. I'll take you on a journey back in time to the age of the pyramids, the 5th dynasty, when the role of high officials and lords such as T rose to a level never seen before in Egyptian history. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do it now to stay up to date with the new episodes. Let's go! The Mastaba of T is located about 700 meters northwest of Djoser's pyramid and only 150 meters northeast of the famous Serapeum, which I showed you in the previous episode. This mastaba is huge, 40 meters long and 34 meters wide. In front of us, the entrance to the tomb from the northern side. The monumental portico was decorated with once 4-meter-high pillars adorned with images of T. There are about 100 of his depictions in the entire tomb. This is a typical image of an Old Kingdom official. A naked torso and a short kilt with a triangular front. T wears a long wig and a short, square beard. In his hands a long staff and a Sekhem scepter, symbolizing his office. One of his titles, the Unique Friend, refers to his special relationship with the pharaoh. Through the portico we enter an open courtyard with pillars. This is the oldest monumental courtyard in non-royal architecture known in Egypt. From here we can get to the underground burial chamber. This is one of the few Saqqara mastabas whose burial chambers are open to visitors. We'll go inside later. So stay with me. The two feathers accompanying T's image are a hieroglyph corresponding to the letter Y. Above it there's a symbol of a bent rope, that is T. We don't know what his name meant, but we do know his titles. He could call himself the king's unique friend because he had direct contact with the ruler thanks to his position as director of the hairdressers of the Great House. We're about to see the cult chapel. It's impressive, 5 by 7 meters and 5 meters high. Behind the southern wall there's a serdab with a cult statue. Serdab is 10 meters long and is the largest known to us from the times of the Old Kingdom. 3 narrow openings connected with the chapel. As we know, these forever isolated statues were to become the habitat of Ka, a part of a soul, which is a human double, or rather his original form, and at the same time a protector in the afterlife, supplying with food that the relatives of the deceased placed in the cult chapel. Ka led the deceased before Ra. For this to happen, T's Ka had to recognize him in the sculpted figure, hence extremely realistic, life-size sculptures were created in the Old Kingdom. In the future, they were replaced by better and better prepared mummies. It's a miracle that these reliefs have been preserved in such good condition despite the passage of almost 4,500 years. Unlike the royal burials of the time, the private tombs of the Egyptians were richly decorated with reliefs immortalizing their achievements and inscriptions, which appear in royal tombs only at the end of the 5th dynasty. In this mastaba alone, archaeologists counted about 1,800 carved figures. What a great career T had. He was responsible, among other things, for the royal agricultural domains. One of the most famous reliefs shows cattle being driven through dangerous papyrus marshlands. We see a calf carried on the back of one of the drovers. The scared calf is probably calling its mother. Interestingly, the inscriptions not only describe what we see on the reliefs, but also, like in ancient comic book, we have texts spoken by the characters in the scenes. A man walking right behind the drovers, swinging a stick, shouts, "Hey, curse word here? Make the oxen move." At that time, some of the agricultural domains were intended to provide food during the implementation of great royal projects, such as the pyramids and sun temples at Abu Sir, the construction of which T also supervised. T served under 5 pharaohs. The oldest mention of him was found in Abu Sir, in the temple of the second ruler of the 5th dynasty, Saqqara, whereas his tomb was completed under the rule of the 6th ruler, Ini. So the location of the mastaba at the northern end of Saqqara isn't a coincidence. He wanted to be buried close to his kings, because it was these 5 pharaohs who built their pyramids in the new royal necropolis of Abu Sir, adjacent to the north. Ini's successor, Menkaure Kayu, returned to Saqqara. Here we see T standing on a reed boat among papyrus marshlands. One detail in this elaborate scene catches my attention. It's a famous relief, a hippopotamus hunt. There's a lot going on here. A hippopotamus hit by harpoons is fighting the crocodile, and at the same time, another hippopotamus hit by 5 harpoons is still fighting for its life, but the hunters on the boat are ready for the final strike. These scenes perhaps illustrate T's efforts to tame the wild, swampy areas, to transform them into new farmlands. Just like the pharaoh, T is the servant of mad divine order in his fight against the wild, untamed nature that the Egyptians associated with chaos. The grand scale with which T presented himself and the previously unseen wealth of his burial are a harbinger of new times that had dawned in Egypt at that time. The 25th century BC was a time of great changes in Egypt, a time of deepening crisis. Previously all-powerful divine rulers with unquestioned authority began to share power with officials outside the ruling family. As we know, during the golden age of the 4th dynasty, when the tops of the great pyramids of Giza marked the peak of the development of the pharaonic empire, almost all state officials were appointed from among members of the royal family. It changed during the 150 years rule of the 5th dynasty, when the highest offices were filled by non-royals, most often coming from among the military or growing in power sun priests from Heliopolis. These offices also became hereditary, thus consolidating their autonomy. The mastaba of T is the best example of these changes. Monumental, non-royal architecture and large family tombs were new to Egypt. This beautiful chapel wasn't reserved only for members of the T family, but under certain conditions. T himself warns and instructs in an inscription at the entrance to the mastaba. All people who will enter into my tomb of eternity unclean, because they have eaten of the abominable things which repel a mind, which has arrived in the necropolis not being pure at the appropriate time, as they must be to penetrate into the god's temple, a judgment will be uttered against them because of it by the great God, the place where one judges in truth. Because I am of excellent mind, educated in all the secrets of the divine book of the craftsmanship of the ritualistic priest. On the contrary, all men who will enter in this my tomb of eternity in a state of purity at the appropriate time, as one is clean to penetrate into the temple of the great God, I will be his support in this august courthouse of the great God, and I will act diligently. The western wall of the chapel is dominated by a pair of almost identical false doors, 4.5 meters high. In front, a stone offering table. This is the oldest known false door, topped with a cavetto cornice. What exactly were false doors? I'll tell you about them in a moment. For now, let's go to the second room. The storeroom was used to keep offerings and cult objects. It's a small room, only about 5 meters long and 1.5 meters wide. The reliefs here are in excellent condition. They show craftsmen at work. The workers, craftsmen and scribes seem to be working on the same project here, probably producing and providing food for the construction crews at Abu Sir, supervised by T himself. At his feet are shown much smaller his son, also named T, and his wife, Neferhetepes. The inscriptions describe individual stages of work. For example, by bakers we have heating the oven and kneading the dough. They also show commands of scribe of the warehouse, such as "make it quickly." The production of the national drink of the Egyptians, beer, which they call heneket, is also shown here. We see individual stages of production marked as, among others, filling the jars, closing the jars, and guaranteeing the authenticity, that is, marking beer jars with quality, place, and date of production. A funny scene from the tomb shows the boast of one of the harvesters, who says to his colleagues while working, "Who is the lad who works instead of talking? It is me. I tell you this, workmates, who are like women." The narrow 1 meter wide corridor is also beautifully decorated. Of course, it's impossible to show you all these reliefs. Each of them tells us their own tale, and there are hundreds of them in this tomb. Therefore, it's priceless for Egyptologists, even though there are larger and perhaps even more beautiful mastabas in Saqqara. We're back in the courtyard. It's time to visit the underground. First, a very narrow passage, then a wide corridor of about 15 meters, and we're in the burial chamber. The chamber is surprisingly tight. It's very austere. There are no decorations, only a massive limestone sarcophagus. When the discoverer of the tomb, Auguste Mariette, arrived here in 1860, the same one who discovered the nearby Serapeum, of course he found an empty sarcophagus, a typical situation for Old Kingdom tombs. There wasn't even a trace of the remains. So this is probably where T, one of the highest pharaonic officials of his time, ended his path on earth. If we believe the inscriptions in his mastaba, he held about 50 different offices, including overseer of all royal works, overseer of royal documents, overseer of all royal regalia. He titled himself sole companion, possessor of love, beloved favorite of his lord. As director of intimates of the king, he certainly had direct, perhaps physical contact with the pharaoh. As we know, accidentally touching the king by an unauthorized person meant a certain death sentence. At that time, the pharaoh was still considered a living god. However, the magnificent mastaba of T is a sign of new times for the Egyptians. There's a continuing rise in the importance of the non-royal elite, manifested in their monumental funerary architecture, while the royal pyramids become smaller and smaller. The smallest of all, the pyramid of the last ruler of the 5th dynasty, Unas, in its funerary text also proves the great change that was the introduction of the religion of Osiris, which would soon dominate the funerary rites of all of Egypt, replacing the elite royal solar cult and promising salvation to everyone, regardless of social position. Everyone could be reborn in him, in Osiris. The democratization of religion, the weakening of the king's authority, the heredity of state offices, all this will ultimately contribute to the collapse of Egyptian statehood, which occurred during the crisis in the 22nd century BC, when, after the death of the childless Pepi II of the 6th dynasty, the country plunged into a civil war, and long-term drought, as well as low levels of the Nile inundation, resulted in dozens of years of famine. Powerful local lords administering their nomes rose to power, ushering in 125 years of nomarchs' rule that simply ignored the weak rulers of the 7th and 8th dynasties residing in Memphis. We call this dark period in Egyptian history the First Intermediate Period. Returning south towards Djoser's pyramid, we're passing a lot of mastabas, as you can see. Here in Saqqara, wherever we look, we come across an indispensable element of the Egyptian mastaba: false doors, a remnant of hundreds of demolished mastabas built here from the times of the Old Kingdom to the beginning of the New Kingdom. The false door was usually located on the western wall of the place of worship in the tomb, and represents a symbolic passage to another world, a gate through which the soul of the deceased entered the tomb's chapel to be nourished by the offerings, strengthened and refreshed. It was a place where interaction between the dead and the living took place. The real passage was to be in the middle of the false door, where the drum was, imitating a rolled-up reed mat above the opening, which symbolized that the door was simply open. Such mats were commonly used to close doors in Egyptian homes since the earliest times. On the doors were the names and titles of the dead, as well as formulas addressed to Anubis, and from the times of the 5th dynasty also to Osiris. Here in Saqqara, both tiny symbolic false doors as well as monumental, wonderfully decorated ones were found, such as in the huge MASTABA of Mereruka, a powerful vizier from the 6th dynasty. I'll show it to you another time. In the New Kingdom, false doors were replaced with offering stele. I plan to return to Saqqara this summer, so let me know in the comments what you'd like to see. If possible, I'll try to film more for you, not just the mastabas. Of course, I invite you to watch my other episodes from Saqqara, links in the description. I also recommend my podcast about Egyptian religion, in which I present, among others, Old Kingdom funerary cult, the cult of Anubis, and Ra's nocturnal journey through the afterlife. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy our historical adventures and want to help me continue this, please join my Patreon community, link below the video. Please like, comment and share my video with your friends. I'd like to thank all the supporters of my channel, especially my dear patrons. Thanks to you I can create new content. And if you're new here, I recommend you to watch my videos from other ancient sites as well as my podcasts about ancient Egyptian beliefs and history. Last but not least, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to be up to date with new episodes. See you on another ancient site.